Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals dealt a blow to advocates of the Confederate monuments staying up here in the city of New Orleans. Big victory for the mayor and his legal team. And now the city is moving forward with their bid process. April 4th is when all the bids are due to take down the monuments, and the city wants the monuments removed by May the 19th. Well, with us now are some folks that would like to see these monuments stay up. They're with a group called the Monumental Task Committee, and I'm very pleased to welcome Geary Mason, who's been with us before, and Charles Marsala, who we saw in the U.S. Senate race, and we see here on WLAE. He's got his own program. And Charles, welcome. Geary, welcome. Geary, let's start with you. So, obviously the court decision was a blow, right?
Yes, it was negative, and it was not what we would have liked, but the rumors of the monument's demise is greatly exaggerated because it is just a little bit of a setback. We have plenty of positive things going on. I believe the case, even though the city to take the monuments down, the case is still up in court. Okay, and then in state court, we still have a totally separate suit going on. Okay, and depending on how that goes, we can appeal.
Right.
And maybe all the way to the state supreme. There's still open. There's a lot of positive things can happen with the state legislature.
But Charles, the CNC's down by May, racing against the clock, aren't we here?
We are. The city is going to have some trouble. You know, as you look at other cities doing this, and why I ran as a senator was it needs to be addressed nationally. And cities like Louisville, Kentucky, they have an issue. They estimated the cost to take a monument down. Does the city have enough money to do it even? You know, they've done other construction around these monuments. So they may have some issues to have the funding to do what they want to do.
Geary, this is a nationwide movement, not just New Orleans, because I did some research just like Charles has, and this is happening in Baltimore, and Louisville, and Memphis. It's happening in my alma mater, Vanderbilt. It's happening here in New Orleans. And I was encouraging my radio listeners to sign a petition asking Donald Trump and Congress to intervene. And I'm getting a lot of traction on that. So is that an option, the federal level?
Everything's an option.
Yeah.
The most easiest option is the one that we've proposed from the beginning. The Monumental Task Committee did in-depth research, studied this, and we came up with a three-point plan that was a simple answer and wouldn't cost the city anything. You know, and that was, number one, let's all practice tolerance and respect of all monuments. Number two, if there's an old misunderstood monument, like obviously there are here, you can put an interpretive plaque on that monument, put it in more current context. They did that in Baltimore recently. Same thing happening. And number three, the best idea is let's not tear down monuments, let's build new ones. And we've done studies, we've sent teams of volunteers through the community. We've done dozens and dozens of locations that would be great for new monuments.
Charles, you've done some research into these monuments, and we're going to show our viewers these monuments again. What's their value?
Well, you know, if you look at the value in just dollars, what would a piece of art go for? You know, you're looking at $2, $5, $10 million. We're talking about dramatic art that could end up in a private museum because, as a former mayor, if you declared a nuisance in this part of New Orleans, you can't say it's not a nuisance in that part of New Orleans. So you can't then repurpose it outside someplace else. And as it goes into storage, the city hasn't been transparent. They have not said, here's our process, here's how we're going to dispose of it, it's going to go out to bid, or what's going to happen to these monuments. And these monuments are the most valuable. There are other people who might be more controversial that they haven't talked about, but seemingly they've taken down the most valuable ones, or the ones they want.
We're talking about 4 here that are being targeted, but the Monumental Task Committee, Geary, has been working to preserve all monuments in the city, right? It's not like you guys are just concerned about these 4 monuments, correct?
That's right. The Monumental Task Committee was formed in 1989. You know, and it's a 501c3 nonprofit, not supported by any public funds. It's all private donations. It's people donating $25, $50, $100, all tax deductible. That's what keeps us going. And we've been maintaining every monument in New Orleans, all monuments, since 1989. So we're about keeping all the monuments up.
And of course, you've been doing it all on private dollars. City has given you a big fat zero, right?
That's right.
Charles, as a former mayor, as someone who ran for the Senate, you know the value of these things as tourist attractions, right? I saw a ranking that listed Lee Circle as one of the top 10 tourist attractions in New Orleans.
Jeff, it's funny you say that because when you go to the airport in New Orleans, there's a picture of Lee Circle up there advertising it as a tourist attraction. And Beauregard is at the end of the streetcar line, and he put the streetcar lines back in place after the Civil War. So if you were going to Jazz Fest, you end the streetcar ride at Beauregard statue. And they want to get rid of these. They don't realize what these men did as far as Beauregard with the customs house, putting the railroads in, desegregation. There's no talk about the character of these men right now.
Mm-hmm. You know, Charles, as a former mayor, and you probably know that the value of transparency, the bid process is secretive here. The donor who's funding this is secretive here. Wouldn't you say that could be the target of a lawsuit? I mean, shouldn't the public have that kind of information? Who's funding this? Who's bidding on this?
Well, you know, Jeff, after the council met in 2015, I called our city attorney and I said, I don't think you would let us do this.
Yeah.
I went back to the council in 2016 and said, I think you guys made several procedural errors here. You didn't give equal time to those who want to preserve the monuments. You've done some other things where you should have had one motion for each monument. Mm-hmm. The motion right now, as it stands, has Liberty in it, and they can't go forward with Liberty. Mm-hmm. So they should have to redo that motion.
Well, although there was a decision on the Liberty Monument too, right, Geary, giving you know, the approval for that to be removed. So they're two separate, though, court decisions.
Correct.
So now it looks like that will be wrapped into trying to remove the other. So the state legislature is going to be meeting soon. Do we have some names of some legislators who are going to be working on legislation to support these monuments? People that we can work with to try to get this through the legislature?
There are some legislators working on some legislation at this point. Actually, it's a bunch of them. So I don't know if I can single out.
Are any of them willing to come forward and be public about it?
Oh yeah, they will. I mean, it's once they get something drafted and once they get something that's ready to go, they will. But in the meantime, what we're urging people to do is to contact your legislators and just tell them to please approve some kind of state law to protect all monuments.
Right.
And we'll have a bill number probably in a week or two. And when we get something specific, we'll email it out to everybody so they have something specific to support. But in the meantime, we want to put public pressure on lawmakers to pass a state law.
Last year, we had a bill, but it got delivered to a committee that was a death sentence for the bill, right? John Alario made sure that the bill would not pass. So we need to make sure that this time the bill at least gets voted on by the whole legislature, right?
Correct. That's the strategy.
Yeah. Charles, I've been disappointed, and you're a politician, that we haven't had more courageous politicians come forward and say, hey, these monuments need to stay. I haven't heard the senators say anything. I haven't heard the members of Congress say anything. These legislators are not showing much courage. You guys are, me on the radio, a lot of the public, but where are the politicians?
I have been disappointed as well. And to me, the solution is pretty simple. There's a federal law that if a monument's on federal land, you can't touch it. So why wouldn't you just take that template and say the state accepts that same law and the cities accept that same law and you protect the monuments? I mean, what we have here is we're saying that the context they were put up in during Jim Crow era, somehow those mayors were promoting racism and segregation. So therefore the monuments need to come down. But the quality of the men are fabulous. So if you took down a monument today from Lee and then a good group that said, hey, Lee did this and we want to put up a monument for Lee, could they do it? Right. It is very confusing. And the politicians do need to step up and say, this is just a disaster until we get a template that works for all states.
Gary, Charles hit upon it. The argument that the mayor and others are using is that these are symbols of racism, of inequality, of mistreatment of African Americans, of slavery. So how do you respond to that?
Well, I firmly believe it's not a racial thing. I mean, this is about preserving history. And our history is what it is. I mean, historians can argue about the causes of the Civil War and all that all day long, and you can find people that have all kind of different reasons for it. But it happened. The citizens in New Orleans at the time thought it was important enough to build a monument to these events or these people, and they should be preserved. The city accepted it, and I think they have an obligation to preserve them.
And can we learn from history by destroying history?
No, we can't. But and I do want to add, Beauregard was a desegregationist. His words were equal right, one country, one flag, one people in 1870s.
And he was from this area.
He was from this area. He did other things that were, his eulogy was given by an African American at his service.
Right.
Jefferson Davis sold his plantation to his slaves and financed it after training them how to run it and fought for patent rights for inventions that they came up with. So when we look at these men, they were the most liberal and progressive of the men of the era. So why would you say that these guys were trying to promote an evil
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
I think you make some very good points. Final comments here, Geary. I guess it's all going to depend on funding, and your group is really the lead group, so you still need people to get behind the work of the Monumental Task Committee.
Absolutely. We're still fighting this. We're fighting into the courts. We've got the legislature coming soon. We're talking to politicians at all levels.